Good evening, everyone. We have every week is important. Every week is a chance to be inspired. And this week we're really blessed. Um, if you're not muted, please do so, except of course the performers. And but anyway, I want to introduce to you Mark Dresser on bass, Michael Desson trombone, and Anthony Davis piano, here to inspire you. Let the music begin. Oh, and mute. Hide yourself. No, I can't make it.
When you want something, I make it.
But it's good.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. That was a composition of Michael Desson on trombone called "What Peace Can We Hear?" We're going to continue with a early work of Anthony Davis called "Lady of the Mirrors." We're going to continue with I Can Smell You Listening.
Many of whom have become very ill and hospitalized. The youngest Angelinos, California, American.
We're going to continue with a piece by Anthony Davis. I believe this is called You Have the Right to Remain Silent. It's from his opera, The Central Park Five. Thank you.
Thank
Anthony
you.
Davis. Michael Desson.
Unmute yourself so you can. The clapping begins.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Bravo, bravo.
Awesome.
Bravo, bravo.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Bravo, bravo.
Hey, James. Hey,
Sounds
Hester.
great, you guys.
Bravo.
Thank you. It's such a wonderful performance. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
They're gonna do it. Good, yeah.
Yeah, but it's it's music that heals us. It's music that holds the magic. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Great
you know,
concert.
just trying to make it all possible. Um, anyway, so in that regards, if you haven't donated, do so. But I wanted, to, I think it's interesting to know. Well,
All right.
I don't know. I don't sort of like to force anything on you. If you want to start talking about the music you played, or do you want to start telling me stories? I would like to hear, I personally would like to hear stories, but maybe we should start with the music itself that each of you played. You played three pieces, yeah?
I think 4 pieces.
Or, yeah.
So why don't we hear a little bit about what we heard? And where it came from, why you, what do you remember? Because not all of them are recent, but or why you chose to play them.
Gosh, I'm going to pass this to Anthony because, you know, the last piece, since we're going backwards, I mean, this is from a work that he just won the Pulitzer Prize for, and we're fortunate enough to be able to play an excerpt of it, and it's just been my pleasure to play with Anthony and his music since 1975. So I'd like to let him handle the why and the what of this music.
Yeah. Well, that was funny. Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, it's been so fantastic to play with Mark over the years. We've developed. I mean, he's played in almost every opera I've done, as well as just duos and groups, etc. So you have the right to remain silent. Obviously, comes to the Miranda. What you hear when you're arrested, and the original idea. I wrote a clarinet concerto for J.D. Perrin, and so the idea was the clarinet was being interrogated by the orchestra, and there'd be a spotlight on the clarinet. And then what this music comes from is the second movement of the piece, which is also titled Loss. And a lot of it was, I was really, it's almost, it's a tribute to Charles Mingus as well. When you get into the second part of it, it's definitely, I was thinking of Mingus, and Mingus has been a huge influence on my music. And I like to think of him also because he was so aware politically, and his music spoke about politics in such an eloquent way. And so it was natural for me to come back to that, because I mean, Mingus, as I said, has been an ongoing influence on my music. It was fantastic to play with Michael and Mark on it. So, and I like to think about a lot of my music has political roots in it, somewhere, even when I had to write a clarinet concerto, I had to make it, you have the right to remain silent, because it had to be about, I thought of it in theatrically. And how it's used in Central Park 5, that opening music that we have with the kind of repeating ostinato figure that I'm doing the piano. I'm actually playing 9 against 8 in the piano, a figure in 9 against 8. That's when we introduced the 5, that music was used behind that. And there are of course, other sections it evolves. And then the second part was this theme played by the baritone saxophone that comes in. It comes in to introduce the mass figure. So I guess that was that. Maybe Mark can talk about his piece too.
Thank you.
The It's hard to follow that. I have a jokey title called I Can Smell You Listening, but actually the title kind of generated after the day after 9/11. I was didn't know what to do, and I took my I guess she was just starting her first day in middle school, and school was out, and we went over to Matt Moran, the wonderful vibraphone player, and played trio with Alexander Montano, the great late singer, who was a wonderful improviser, and she had been a core member of the Glass Ensemble for years, and she's just a fabulous musician, and um, and she was very fond of patchouli oil. So, like at the end of the session, and of course we were all in shock, and I just said, that, "Well, I can smell you listening," So that's how the title came. But the music, of course, generated. Much later, but I don't know. It's my nature to try to find humor in the most horrible of times. But and in terms of the musical content, well, I'll let you heard it. So I have nothing more to say on that. If
Yeah, you don't need to force yourself, because
oh no,
I agree that the music speaks for itself. It's sometimes like, sometimes there are stories, and that's
yeah,
all. So if there's stories to tell, you
yeah,
should tell them. And all stories, I think, are good.
yeah,
Well, maybe not. Some aren't always for a broad listenership, but
yeah.
they're all good.
Right. I mean, finding satiric titles is one of my favorite things to do.
Oh,
One of the tunes that we didn't play today was Heil Twitler. That
Dig Isle, Dig Isle.
yeah. So, but it's like it's so not a joke anymore. It's like I can't even stomach to do it. So anyhow, but I just want to say that to actually perform with people live, even if it's in the virtual space, boy, I really feel it. You all are giving me a reason to be, and I'm very grateful for that. And having watched these concerts, the pre-recorded ones and the live ones, I really can feel a difference with the live ones. And anyhow, it's again, I just want to, I see lots of friends out and family and students, and it's just wonderful. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. You want to tell us any stories about your music, Michael?
I want to echo everything Mark just said. It's really wonderful. Thank you, Patricia, and for everything you've done here and with the organization Arts for Art. I could tell quickly about this. My piece, the very first one, was actually composed for what we call a telematic concert, kind of like this, but here we're all about 70 miles apart. That one was for a concert called Interconnections for Peace, where we had a band in San Diego, another band in New York, and led by Sarah Weaver, and some great improvisers there, and another band in Korea. And so we had composers from all three sites create. So I was one of the composers, and it was a peace themed concert. So when we're dealing with distances like Korea to California, there's a little bit of what we call latency, delay in the sound. So I wrote that piece to be a kind of a sort of an open rhythmic feel, or multi-layered rhythmic feel with multiple tempos going on, to be able to accommodate that kind of delay between the sites. And the title, "What Piece Can We Hear?" or "What Piece Can You Hear?" was because the piece was inspired by some other music that I think rhythmically is structured in this kind of multi-dimensional, multi-layered way, but could work um, in that kind of a space in a certain sense, and was also in certain ways like just felt kind of connected to. So one of the pieces it was inspired by was Ornette Coleman's piece, "What Reason Could I Give?"
Hmm.
from the classic album Science Fiction, and another is a really important concert that John Coltrane did at the end of his life in Japan, the track "Peace on Earth."
Oh, yeah.
And so that was a peace themed inspiration for it. So kind of bringing those two titles together.
Hmm.
But it's just so great to be here, and I, like Mark, I see so many friends in the comments. It's just overwhelming to be able to, it's really amazing actually. I was thinking about this, just scanning the names in the comments and thinking about how we always see friends at concerts, you know, but there's usually a few friends at a concert and then a lot of people you don't know. The nature of this medium allows for friends who are all across the world to show up. I've got people I know here from Japan and, you know, across the United States and other places. And so it's really interesting that in a way we can have even more of a feeling of creating that kind of community across space through a medium like this. So that's one interesting aspect of it. For all the downsides, there are some positives. So I really want to send my thanks to everyone for showing up. It was really great to see you all here. Thank you.
And we're thankful for all the good things because the dark side just kind of like highlights how good we have it
Right.
in certain moments, at least like this. And I really feel that how did you, it would be helpful for all of us to understand how we came to this place, not this place in time, not this historical moment, but how we came to the music. So if you would tell me some of your early stories, I think people would enjoy hearing them. Just some stories of how, what brought you into the music.
I grew up in a musical family. My mom was, for a wedding gift, my grandparents gave my parents a piano. And it wasn't that she was a pro, it's that every Jewish family's got to have music in the house. So like, I took piano lessons from this wonderfully eccentric Austrian piano teacher, Hansi Alt, who lived right next door. And I did that for years, and at least 4 years. And then she moved, and then that, anyhow, and then the bass came into my life at age 10. Again, growing up in Los Angeles, it was a period when they actually offered music lessons. They offered orchestra, and you could rent an instrument for $3 a semester. And so, and at that time, around that time, my mom got involved in the folk revival and started taking guitar lessons. And then I don't know how many years, but I would say close to 10 years, we would have weekly hootenannies at our home, and a home of a dear friend of my mom who was who was a visual artist and was a center for. She became the artist to do all the work for George Harrison. There was a big connection with India and the ethnomusicology folks at UCLA. So there was, all kinds of multicultural things coming into my life. And then just, playing in bands and just finding myself always wanting to expand. And by high school, there was a flute player named Michael Harriton, and he had a radio show on KPFK, and we'd go at 2 a.m. and free improvise. And anyhow, I just started, and then hearing Mingus and hearing Jimi Hendrix, just like the green light, buying a multi-track recorder, and started doing sound on sound in high school. Just like, yeah, I was a terrible student. I loved goofing off, in the practice room, and that's sort of how things began for me.
It's great. Yeah, it's great. How did so you grew up in California?
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles.
And then you when did you
first came to New York in 1975 for a year. I thought I was taking a 3-week vacation and didn't come home for 2 years. And and ended up in New Haven. At the first day I moved to New York, someone threw a brick through my back window, and the woman I was living had friends in New Haven, and within a week I met Anthony Davis, and on my 24th birthday we played a duo concert at the Foundry, and
wow,
that's how it goes. And in 1976, we took a trip back to California, came back, and found out we had 2 weeks to move out of our sublet. And my dear friend William and Patricia Parker, William told me he was the super at this building, and he hooked us up with a free sublet. We were like, "Mutz, he literally saved our life." So my regard for the Parkers, Patricia and William, they couldn't be higher.
I didn't remember that. I remember hanging out with you. I didn't remember that story. But stories are great. They're so,
Yeah.
it's like, because everyone can relate to them because everyone has them,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think the way we find ourselves, the music, I hope that there are still ways that it can happen in an organic way, not just at colleges, more organically. But anyway, so tell me some more stories. Hey, Michael, you want to tell me your story?
Well, actually, what you just said is what I've been thinking about. I grew up well, obsessed with music, like most of us who end up doing this, you know. So I was around a lot of amateur music making and all kinds of music. Ended up just so deep in it by the end of high school that I went to a conservatory and got exposed to all. I grew up in North Carolina, so when I went to the conservatory, I met a lot of students from different parts of the world and got exposed to a lot of new ideas about music and types of music, non-Western music, electronic music, jazz was. I got way into that there, but I have to say that, and I hope this is changing in the field. But you know, for example, the jazz program at the conservatory that I went to was largely white men. It was only white men faculty. It still is actually, even though they've got a much bigger faculty now, and not just that, but people who teach and study there are kind of connected to a certain community, a certain sort of way of thinking about jazz. So not it's I learned a lot. I got a lot of great things out of being there, but by the time I was done with the conservatory, I really wanted to go as far away from it as possible. So I actually left not just schools but music for like 5 years and did entirely other things with my life. And when I finally decided to go back to school, it wasn't really that I wanted to go to school. I just happened to be kind of stuck in a particular place because I'd gotten married and my wife was in school there. And I found out that Yusef Lateef was teaching in the jazz program at the University of Massachusetts Amherst at that time. And so I thought, well, I just want to study with Yusef Lateef, but the only way I could figure out to do that was to do a master's. So I applied and got in, and Yusef really changed my. He filled in what was missing for me from my previous exposure to jazz. So, for example, I could go through 4 years of jazz studies at the conservatory, and I never heard about the AACM or BAG or much about the communities in New York that William's been such an important part of the history of, right? So there were a lot of histories that just were not really dealt with there because the conception of jazz was sort of a little bit more constrained. And so when I met Yusef, it wasn't so much that he opened up those histories to me, but he really got me thinking differently about the music. He didn't even use the word jazz, and at that point, and so he really opened up my whole way of approaching things. And then from there, I found out after doing that degree that George Lewis and Anthony Davis were teaching at UC San Diego. So I thought, well, I'll just keep doing this. I'll go out there and study with them. And I guess it means doing a PhD. I didn't really understand much about what that would lead to, but I wanted to study with them. So I went out there and did a PhD. So I've been in academia now for a very long time, but I got into it through these people who, and of course, meeting George and meeting Anthony, they opened up my thinking to all these different communities that are part of the history of this music. So I learned about all kinds of people I'd never really understood what their work was about, but they really opened those doors for me. So then I started meeting people like Mark and many other people, and developed a sense of the music that kind of gave me the meaning that I needed to sort of develop a practice. So that's really kind of that's why in a lot of ways I'm really committed to thinking about how we can make school programs. They're always going to be school programs. They're not going to suddenly overnight become something radically different, but we can get really amazing people into them if we work at it. And that's really a big part of what my mentors have been doing, and that's a part of what I'm involved with. So the partnership with organizations, the bringing cool people in to just open up the expanse of how music is dealt with in schools is a big part of what I'm committed to more and more.
That's that's very important work. So good. It's really important. All right, Anthony.
Hey, Yeah, I had I could tell a little story. I started as a classical pianist completely until I was in 10th grade. And in 10th grade, my family moved to Italy for the year. And I couldn't bring all my music. At first, we didn't have a piano, so I would go to the Steinway store to practice. Someone, as a joke, gave my dad this record, Monk in Italy, with Thelonious Monk record. And I fell in love with the music, with Monk's music. And so I learned all the tunes on the record, and I started playing Monk tunes, and also started to write my own music too. And so I started playing. I would play at in the Steinway store in Italy and play Beethoven and Chopin and Schumann and stuff like that, and then play a Monk tune or something. So then they liked the Monk tune, so I started playing more of that. And then so I became obsessed with that music. So they had this record store where you could take out, kind of records were on a carousel, and you could listen to 4 records before you bought one. So I listened to Coltrane records and Miles records and Cecil Taylor and everybody. And so that was my introduction to the music. And then when I was a freshman at Yale, I went to this jam session after a concert, Archie Shepp concert with Sonny Murray. And so I went to a jam session. I was playing piano with Sonny Murray and Byron Lancaster and other people. And this trombone player sat in, and it was George Lewis, who was also a freshman at the time. So we began a lifelong friendship from that. We've been playing and doing music together ever since. And then that same year, I met Marion Brown and Leo Smith, Wadada Leo Smith. And Wadada was living in New Haven at the time, and he was putting up posters for a duo concert. So I heard them, and then I invited Wadada to come hear my band, to come in and sit in with us. And he didn't come for a number of times. And finally, one day he came, and then we've been playing together ever since too. So a lot of people, I met in 1970, in my first year as a freshman, had a lifelong impact, in terms of my music and stuff. So that was really fun. And Wadada opened my ears to a lot of things. I think in 1970, I was much more of a bebop player. I was solely into McCoy Tyner and Herbie Hancock and all that, and playing changes and doing that. And a lot of my music was like that. And then when I heard Wadada start, he came to a gig of mine. He said, "What happened to your left hand?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" So he said, "Well, he wanted me to play with my left hand." So I started playing solos with my left hand. So it opened up a whole thing. So I listened to Cecil, and also all the stride players like James P. and Fats Waller, early, Duke Ellington, Duke, of course. And that opened up a whole thing in terms of developing as a pianist.
Wow. Yeah, that's so all right, so all right, I'm just gonna throw these questions out. What is the role of the kind of spirituality that maybe Coltrane stuff and Eiler stuff, and then there's the political or social justice or the cry of freedom, or all those are what roles did those things play? Are those things that inform what you do, and how so? And
for me, it formed everything. I mean, Coltrane was a big starting point it was really I was listening to his music, and unfortunately I never got to hear him live because but the effect of his music. And then I remember my freshman year at Yale, we had the Bobby Seale trial in New Haven. So I became involved with Black Panthers as monitoring demonstration. So I always linked music with politics, with the political struggle and the idea. I remember hearing McCoy Tyner come do a benefit for the Panthers in the ice rink at New Haven, and that was an amazing concert. So I always felt that the music and politics were hand in hand, hand in glove. And when I started doing my first opera, X, I started, a lot of the basis of the opera was looking at Malcolm's evolution and also the musical evolution at the same time, how the music evolved over the time from the late 40s into the 60s. And Malcolm was there. Malcolm loved the music. And I remember Billy Taylor telling me a story about when he was doing his radio show on WBAI, Malcolm used to do his sermon first. And then, then literally Malcolm does the sermon, Coltrane comes on to play. So Malcolm would stay to hear the music. So I think that shows, how much the music was really, that the politics inspired the music and the music inspired the politics.
Yeah. Well, right. The whole idea of self-determination, really, as far as there's so much I don't know, but it seems like it was very much came out of the musicians taking control of their situation and doing alternative festivals, alternative spaces, and not letting things be defined by what people,
Exactly. That's what the AACM was about too. The whole idea of the AACM, the premise of it is being, about finding new venues to play, also not feeling limited. The music could be anything. Our music is powerful and can be in so many different venues and different avenues.
Right. And I'm gonna, Mark, you have the piece, the Deep Tones for Peace. You want to talk about that in a little bit? Give me the background into it.
Sure. In 2009, a bunch of us started by, the idea was actually Bar Phillips, and there is a bass player in Jerusalem named Jean-Claude Jones, and he wanted to do a music festival to bring people from all over the world to Jerusalem. And Bar said, well, what if we call it Deep Tones for Peace? And at the time, I didn't have much of a thought about it. It sounded okay, but what was interesting to me at the time was to try to make it a telematic concert and join people from all over the world to do something. And once we announced that to do this concert, I was shocked about how many bass players of all kinds of, first of all, I need to tell you, Deep Tones for Peace was a concert for peace for bass players. And the concert was supposed to happen between Jerusalem and New York City. And there were many levels to it that were fascinating. One of it was just once we invited people to play, it didn't matter what genre, they just said, I'm in. It was just the idea of maybe it was the sentiment of an instrumental musician being able to weigh in directly on a vibration of a projection just that way. And in retrospect, there were many things that were complicated and naive about it. And for example, we invited Middle Eastern Arabic bass players, and I had a very moving phone call from the principal bass of the Baghdad Symphony, who said, man, thank you so much for inviting me. I would love to play with you and Bar. This would be a tremendous honor, but you don't understand. It would be unsafe for me and my family to do anything in perceived consort with Israel. So there were levels about this that were so much deeper than the sentiments of our projection. And at the same time, I don't know how it happened. I was in communication. I wanted to invite William, and he couldn't make the gig. And then we came up with an idea called Deep Tones for Peace Now, where people could do these transmissions. They do solo transmissions, and it was on a platform called Ustream TV, and the response from folks was really touching. And anyhow, so I don't know. I think probably we've been about 2 months ago, I would think, or at least 6 weeks ago, we started talking about this. I wrote him and William, and his response is, yeah, the time is now. Let's do it. So having the weight of his spiritual projection behind this gave me the courage to jump into this thing again. So on August 1st, we've started after doing all kinds of research of which would be the best way to do this, we're doing a Facebook users group called Deep Tones for Peace 2020. And so far we've invited a bunch of bass players, but it's really open to every bass player, and it might probably will end up being figurative bass players, to play from 5 to 30 minutes with the idea of emanating peace, and working towards changing the vibration of the planet. And again, this is like it's a spiritual projection. I'm going back to my hippie roots. When every time I talk about it, my ironic self is talking at me at the same time. I can't help it, but
Your hair is growing longer.
and at the same time, it's so compelling. I can't help myself but to do it. And with the help of William, Fumiko Wellington, Kyle Model, and Will Yeager, who are volunteering to help this thing. So we're starting that August 1st.
That's great. That's great. We clearly have to do everything we can to get the world back in balance.
It's one of those things you don't have, and I think all of us who play, we don't know what our music is going to do out in the ether, but we certainly know that it changes us. It changes our molecules, and there's something about that makes it all worth the risk, or worth the transcending one's fear, or whatever. It's not quite the right word, but trepidation of doing something. So yeah,
I actually think that, you talk about how it changes your own molecules, and that is true, that is clear, but it also, you remember, it almost as clearly does that for everyone who's listening. And it's also, how the listeners are affecting the musician. And
yeah.
You can feel that more easily when you're in the same space. But I think that you're right, that Zoom allows some of that to get steeped through on the internet.
That's really interesting, Patricia, because Michael and I have been doing this telematic work for 13 years, and I feel the vibe from the audience as profound as a live concert. I feel you. It definitely, I don't know what that is, but I definitely feel it, and I definitely have noticed a difference when watching a pre-recorded, Arts for Art concert and a live concert. Even if the sound is less than perfect, something about you, when you're listening, you ride the wave of the music, and we're all riding it together, and that's felt in my mind.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so so I was I can feel what you're saying, because I've been here too, listening to this. And they both have their value, though. And so we will probably do both, continue to do both. But I think that what I want to emphasize here is the power of the music to change things, to change, to affect people. And I think that even in the listening, there's a quality that the listener brings, that they are also changing things with it. So that's, I like to emphasize that because there was such a brouhaha about participatory art, as though listening wasn't participating, that wasn't enough, and it is. It's like it's incredible, and if people understood how important they are as listeners in changing things, it's anyway.
Anyhow, we're speaking to the preaching to the choir, because everyone here is obviously understands as participating in that and knows it, you know. But I agree with you.
Michael, what do you?
Well, I'll just add. I think it's okay sometimes to preach to the choir, you know,
Okay.
And for various reasons. One is a friend of mine, Sean Griffin, posted a quote from George Lewis, one of our mutual teachers, the other day, that said something to the effect of, sometimes you do have to preach to the choir because you have to organize the choir, prepare the choir, get the choir ready, particularly when you're not in what he called a majoritarian community, you know. So
Good
um,
point.
the music that we're making here requires a certain orientation to listening, a certain orientation to music, a certain way of thinking, and it's not easy all the time for everybody to just the music has incredible vibrational power if you relate in the way that you're saying, Patricia. If you approach it in a certain way, for some of us it can have that power. But I know that, I mean, I had to go through a lot of different personal experiences to reach places where I could understand certain kinds of music in new ways. And life is sort of this spiral where you keep having new experiences that allow you to go back and, not just with music, but anything, experience something that you thought you knew or you already experienced, but it's now different because of where you're at. So I think that talking about this is important, and I love what you're saying, Patricia. I think, you know, music can change consciousness. We know that not only from the kind of music that we're doing here, but, you know, Public Enemy, Gil Scott Heron. I mean, even music without lyrics changes people's consciousness in a deep way. So that's what we're all involved with as musicians, as listeners, as people building community through writing about music, through organizing ways to present music. And I also think that it's not, we don't have to, we do have to fight to make sure that we regain the ability to play music and gather in person. You know, this is not a substitute, and it's not ever intended as that. But I think that in our current world, we have to understand how to better use these media, this medium of telepresence, to do the work that we've traditionally depended on doing in person, because this is a permanent part of our landscape now, telepresence, and we can't just let Facebook and Twitter, you know, define how we relate to each other online, and so we need to figure out what it means to be present together across vast distances, and how to use audio and video for our goals, not the ones that are the corporate executive goals or make money for some big institution or some company. But we got to figure out how to build out these tools in service of our goals as artists, as organizations. So I think that's what a lot of people have been trying to do long before the pandemic. But the pandemic kind of put a spotlight on that, because now it's like we can no longer depend on gathering so much. In person, we have to figure this out. So it's been great to see that a lot of people, musicians, are definitely pushing the limits of this medium, trying to figure out how to use it better. And we're all sharing. There's a lot of information sharing going on. So it's been great to see that grow. But I think we're going to need every tool in the kit, and telepresence is one of them, if we're going to really kind of change consciousness globally to address all the problems we have, not only, you know, our political problems, systemic racism and sexism, but the climate crisis. These are all problems we have to address collectively, but we have to do that using some of these tools in really efficient ways now. So I think we're, part of our job as artists is to learn about that. Like, what's our role? That's what a lot of us are asking. What can we do as part of that?
Well, the way I look at it is like everyone is different. Everyone has gifts. We've been given gifts in this world. Not everyone is good at the technical. There's some people never going to be very good at it. Some people will be great at it. And I actually will have to, or Zach will call you, or I will call you, because you could teach us a thing or two. And that would be great, because it would not just help, it wouldn't help just us, it would help all the listeners and the artists who aren't that good at it. If we can figure out how to make it easier for them, or put them in a situation that enables them to share what they have to share. And so there's different things, like we're each good at something. And it's like finding what you're really good at and how to share that. And then we have, it's like, then we have the power of community. I mean, a community isn't all one talent. It's like the many different kinds of things that we each bring to the table that, that will makes a world worth, possible, that we want to live in. And there's lots of things. And I think that all the creativity and the way, the thing about, well, the music is really special. And I think we've said that, but all the art that's, the more intentional, actually, I think that intentionality is important. The more intentional you are, but it's not always the only thing, then it has even more power. And that if we had the idea of coming together more, that would also keep us from feeling like it's all futile, because it's really hard now. This is, like you said, Mark, this is just a very difficult time. And but when we come together, we're stronger, and not just in ways that we encourage each other, but like, all right, there's the Deep Tones for Peace, there's all the online concerts that are done with that intentionality. There's like people who are willing to play music out in the streets. Some of our community is doing that, and I actually am hoping that can be spread it around the Artists for Free World idea, is a marching band and history collecting and timelines. It's a bunch of things. It's going to have an education part to it. But if this was a national thing and not just an Arts for Art thing. So, but it's like but who has the talent here to do a piece of what needs to get done? I mean, how few people, you were talking, Mike, how few people know much about this music. The reason I asked for your story is because your stories aren't known. Your stories should be known. How, they're interesting, they're exciting. There's a whole history behind what was happening when you came on the scene. There was all the optimism, and there was all the political upheaval, but with not with this darkness, not with a dark cloud over it, but with hope springing out through it. It's like, and then they really suppressed it. I mean, I don't see how. Does anyone disagree with me if you think I'm wrong?
No, I hear you. It's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. I totally hear you on that. I guess the way I see it, there's a lot of battles that were fought around this kind of music and related kinds of music that now, for the generations of musicians that I'm in touch with, who are much younger than me, are sort of like history. They come in, and so they don't think of these things in the same kinds of boxes necessarily that people were trying to put them in 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's a positive. The challenge that I see, although it's a good challenge, but it's a hard challenge, is that a lot of younger musicians right now are just completely overwhelmed with the amount of possible musics that they could explore, information threads in history. So I like, having gone through come up as a musician in, say, the 80s, you know, it feels very different to me now. And it's not that it's better or worse, it's just really different. Those battles don't matter to the younger generations coming up now, but they're trying to figure out how to navigate a really wide range of options in terms of what they can study, what they can do. And they're looking at a lot of schools who have people who are different relationships to those histories. They're trying to figure out they don't even all know those histories very much. It's just sort of all jazz to them. So I think what you're saying is really important.
But
But
they
it's
also think jazz is white music. by the way.
and there's a very kind of mainstream sort of focus to what gets out there and gets a lot of exposure. I'm not sure we're really going to see that change significantly, but there's a lot of there are a lot of things are changing that are really positive. There's a lot of people across the full spectrum of not just jazz but contemporary music who are really looking at how to expand, you know, options for how we think about it, how we see the connections between these things. And that's really to me what it's about, is seeing connections between these different communities, that we can't just put everybody in a little tunnel and say, well, we're going to call this free jazz and say that developed over here. We're going to call this mainstream jazz and say that developed over here. I mean, you hear Anthony talking about where he comes from. He mentions Monk. He mentioned, you know, it's not a simple story. And I think there's a lot of people who've been complicating the story about contemporary, particularly American music, what our roots are in American music across popular forms, across all kinds of things. In classical music, even, there's a lot of people working on complicating the story. And I think that's what, if something gives me hope these days, it's seeing that there's a lot of writers, critics, historians, musicians who are presenting really complicated stories about what this music has to do with who we are and how we relate culturally and what our roots are. And that for example, African American music having such a deep impact on American music in so many ways. I think the range of ways that is understood is expanding. So while it might still feel like there's a lot of the same battles going on, I think the terrain has become broader. So I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm not saying it's over. I hear you, you know, but I
I
think
think
there's a
it's
lot to be hopeful for.
the role that racism, the kind of not unrecognized racism, played in the underfunding and under support for what we may call free jazz is a real thing. But
Absolutely,
and
totally.
it's really terrible that young African Americans don't recognize jazz as being Black. And it's real complicated why that may be so, but it's not something that's okay. It's not really okay. I mean,
Well,
really,
on the other hand, Kendrick Lamar got a Pulitzer. So, I mean, there are ways in which we can see, like,
oh yeah.
there
Well,
are
their
things
individuals
changing.
always get their
But
individuals, but that's
right,
different.
exactly. But I hear you. There's a lot of deep work still to be done on so many fronts. I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Anyway, I think we should well, unless someone else wants to talk on this, maybe we should open up to the audience. What do you think? Does anyone else want to talk on this?
Got a lot of heavy people in this audience, so I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah, well, I see Anthony looking like, are you going to say something, Anthony, or should I open it up?
Oh, just open up. It's fine.
Okay. So let's open it up. Unmute yourself or wave your hands or something if you want to talk.
Patricia,
Bring
can you
it
put my
cards.
video on?
Wait, what?
It says you don't accept my video. This is William.
Oh, well, you know how it is, William.
Okay. I got a question for Anthony Davis.
I'll
sure.
I'll try.
Now, and see if my memory is correct. Now, you were out with the David Murray. You played in the David Murray Octet.
Yes, I did.
And you were in. It's like 19. Well, forget about the year. But y'all were at the North Sea Festival.
That's right. Yeah.
And how was it touring with that band?
I didn't do that much touring with them. I did the records. I did a lot of the recordings. I did two of the recordings. I did travel with David a little bit, doing stuff. But I think maybe John was in the band when they were doing the European tour. I was in the band for the early recordings. Yeah. No, it's a great band. It was like that band was incredible. We had Threadgill and Julius and George Lewis, and it was an amazing band. It was like so many different aesthetics coming at you at the same time. And David, of course, I love playing with David. Mark's played with David a lot longer than I have.
Well, he was the person I came to New York to play with. I mean, that was the first person, because we had played in California together in a trio with Stanley, Crouch, and David. It was my first gig in New York.
Wow.
Yeah, and David, we had a gig at the Public Theater. We were doing Zaki's show, where the Mississippi with Talani and Jessica Hagedorn. It was where the Mississippi meets the Amazon. So we had this band. Actually, the house band was with David, Michael Gregory Jackson, Ferrone on drums, Fred Hopkins on bass, and I was on piano. It was a fantastic band. We had such an amazing time, and we got to play together like for a month and a half or something, every 4 or 5 nights a week. So that was kind of amazing.
All right, I think Manuel would like to speak. Manuel Manchilla. I don't know if I'm pronouncing.
Mancillas. This is Sopilote.
Hey, Zopi.
Hey,
Hey, man.
I got you. Listen, just listening a little bit of history. I've been reading this book just lately. Gerald Horne, Jazz, Justice, and Racism and the Political Economy of the Music. And I think this should be recommended reading, must reading for any Black kid in America. Because if Black kids don't know that jazz is where it comes from, they have to read this book. Because, it's telling us, we hear all this glamour about the music and all of this, but when we start getting into the reality of what was happening back then and now, it is just to really open some minds. And Gerald Horne, he is a fantastic, fantastic historian. I am totally surprised, and I highly recommend this book.
Oh, great.
Really, seriously. It's interesting because to every musician, he puts born in. So you get this perspective of time, of the people that were born in the 1800s, and what they had to go through, and protected by the mob or controlled by the mob. It's just really an eye-opening. So I really highly recommend it, and I am listening. Okay, so I'll go back to my listening.
Thank you, Zopi.
Thanks, Amy.
William, do you have that book yet? William Parker?
No, I don't have that book, but I wrote it down and I'm going to pick it up.
I'm going to pick it up too. Yeah.
I'm going to pick it up. There's so many books out here, it's hard to have them all.
Yeah.
Every time I find out there's one, I try to get it.
So do you know this one? I used it for the course. It's called Bigotry and the Afrocentric Jazz Evolution by Carlton Hester.
No.
That's really, I think that has a revised title, but every chapter talks about racism, class, sexism, and then it gets to the artist. So it really puts things in a very interesting perspective. And
yeah, I think the Artists for a Free World should have these books as reading materials. All right.
Carlton's actually a saxophonist and composer who teaches up at the University of California, Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so we should put together this reading thing for people.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, because people need to understand stuff now, not, things can't be just buried in libraries.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Wow, there's so many people to say hello to.
Right,
Yeah.
let me look at the gallery view.
Ken, Andrea, Judy, and Joe, and
Hey.
Mark Simmons, and my mom, my wife. Hey, Diane Moser, Angie, Angelica Sanchez, and Juan David Rubio, Eileen Troperman, David Keller. Yeah, it's Jason Robinson. Yeah, Michael's family. Yeah, thanks for sticking around.
well, does anyone
Richard, Roberta?
any closing comments, laughter, applause? It's all good.
Just thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so great to
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great
Thank
music,
you.
great conversation.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thanks.
Such a great concert.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Definitely one of the best.
Am I still on?
If you haven't,
Yeah.
Hey, so I just wanted to point out with the Jazz for Justice and everything we're talking about, I mean, this has been going on since the early '80s. When I was working with, I was living, hanging out and playing a lot with Sonship Theus. If anybody doesn't know the work of Sonship Theus, my God, go dig him. The great drummer. But he was also a preacher, in a church. He had a church, and he was talking about from the '80s on the diminution, I guess the proper, of the political aspect of improvised jazz in the Black Afro-American community, and how it was basically being undermined by the I'm trying to remember his exact words, but I have to paraphrase, but by the power of the money people in Los Angeles and so on and so forth, about getting over on a way that was not politically motivated and that it did not represent the political motivation. And him and I would have these talks on a constant basis for years whenever we were driving back and forth to a gig and I'm dropping him off. So that's part of also the demise of this idea of improvisation, this idea of freedom of expression within the domain of art that was being undercut, and he talked about it all the time. I mean, the guy has passed away, Sonship, but it's that message we were talking about that from then, and we see it now even with the idea of bringing in forces, the Department of Homeland Security, into any city that has a Democratic mayor. So all of a sudden, free speech is now being cut down. So I just wanted to bring Sonship Theus's name up inside of this and saying from the early '80s, it's been an issue for us as artists and political people in this art form, which I'll zip my mouth now.
well,
Thank you.
yeah, you're just telling it like it is, and there's not enough of that. We're telling it like it is, and so yeah, let's keep on telling it and tell stories too. You have to tell the hard stories, but also just the stories of how we came into the music, because I think that opens it up to people, but I could tell stories about this, but I think it's 9:45. So let's talk again next time.
Yeah, great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you,
All right,
Patricia.
so thank you
So
so
long.
Thank you. Thank you.
much, everyone, for sharing. And
We'll talk.
all
Thank
right,
you.
salute, salute.
Salud, l'chaim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Astrovia.
There you go.
So,
Love you all.
Love you too.
Yeah.
Thank
Wow.
you, Mark. Thank you, Anthony and Michael, for the beautiful music.
Thank you, Zach. Oh, your
Thank you for everything.
assistance,
Yeah.
shepherding us through.
Yeah,
Yes,
we couldn't, Zach is he's the musical shepherd.
There you go. That's right.
The
I like
technical
that.
help.
Yes.
But I like shepherd better too. Thank you, Zach.
Yes, thanks, Zach.
Thank you for
Thank you, Zach.
you.
That was
Thank you.
wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah, Anthony, Michael, and Mark. Beautiful. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Joe.
So inspiring. Because you guys
Yes.
are inspired. Because you're inspired. That feels so beautiful.
Oh man,
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
everybody.
you.
Judy.
Back at
Everybody.
you.
Hi.
Thanks for giving us some things to listen to.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
To think about it.
Yes.
I'm gonna let y'all talk and I'm just gonna turn myself off.
Hey, well, you
We'll see you all next time.
well, can I? I mean, I'm on this thing. Can I call you in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
I'll call you right back.
Okay, next time. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Great to see you.
yes.
Bye, Richard. Bye,
All
Roberta.
right, Mark.
Bye, Mark.
Take
We
care.
love you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Today's our anniversary. It's a great
Oh, happy
present.
anniversary!
Because we're always at music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, oh
Yeah.
no, an anniversary
So,
without music?
Anniversary present.
And Richard said, no, Mark's playing tonight. And this turned out fabulous.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Visually and sound-wise.
Yes.
Well,
Of course, talent.
but I have to thank Michael Desson for doing all this
Oh my
oh,
God.
work on the sound.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Excellent. The best.
Talking, he's a shepherd.
Always a
Yeah.
All
joint effort.
right.
I call him the Mother Teresa of telematic arts.
Some other truth.
We're going to end up with the 12 disciples here. Obviously. Should I be Mary Magdalene?
Whatever you'd like.